In this video, it's the holiday season, and I'll tell you about the presents that I want for all wargamers. The holidays are pretty much here, and these end-of-the-year holidays are mostly a time for presents. Now, before you get all excited, right, like, this isn't going to be a wargaming gift guide. There are plenty of those out there already, you know, YouTube, wherever, so you can check them out if you want to. Also, next week's video will be the annual Tabletop Minions Awards, so that's still coming. Now, instead, this will be a list of presents that I want for the wargaming industry. More importantly, gifts for the fans of wargaming, and some changes I'd like to see the industry make for the better. Let's start. Present number 1. Help beginners to begin properly. Tabletop wargaming can have a pretty steep learning curve. If you've never done it before and you don't have like a friend or whatever to kind of help you along and let you know what's going on, it can be daunting. If tabletop wargaming wants to keep the newbies that attempt to try tabletop wargaming out and not just have them like buy some stuff and then kind of give up, it needs to do more kind of hand-holding with those newbies. Things like starter boxes are a good start, and there are some great starter boxes out there, but some very simple and inexpensive things can be done to accomplish this. Let's take a look at the biggest company in wargaming, of course, Games Workshop. Though they make several starter boxes for several of their games, they really don't include the real rules that you need to play, right? Like, the starter boxes will give you some simpler starter rules to get the hang of the system, and they'll kind of give you like some stats for the models included in the box, which may or may not be right for, you know, the larger game. But that's pretty much where it ends. After you've played some games with those models and those rules that are there in the starter box, then where do you go next? And what if you don't want the starter box and you just kind of want to get into the game? Games Workshop has a website called Anyway, it's start-warhammer.com, and it's mostly designed to ask you questions and then eventually point you to starter boxes. But there's nothing in there that explains like that to play with other people, like at your local game store, for example, or maybe even like eventually at a bigger event, that you're going to need a rule book, like a regular one, not the truncated rules that are in a starter box. And then, of course, either a codex or a battle tome, you know, depending on which game you play. And you'll also need to grab the most recent quarterly rules update, you know, download documents or whatever to update the rules and the points and all that kind of stuff. It seems like they want you to learn this the hard way. Games Workshop, and of course, you know, other companies that sell you more than just like a single book for rules or more than just like a single boxed game that's all inclusive, like, they should publish a very simple, like 1 to 2 page PDF that explains what is actually needed to really play their game with other players, right? In Warhammer 40K's case, that would mean that you'd need a rulebook, you'd need a codex, you'd need the most recent update documents, downloads, like I mentioned before, and probably, at the very least, a combat patrol box, right? Like, that's it. Now, I mean, that's still a lot, right? That's about $300 American or so just to get those things get rolling. However, you could just play the Combat Patrol format, right? And then, you know, skip the rule books because the Combat Patrol stuff is a free download. So that's a good place to start as well. But frankly, there's not currently a good place to set that all kind of laid out easy for a beginner to wargaming. If a player knew that the starter boxes aren't really what you need to start playing with others like you see at the game stores, then they might skip the starter boxes and head right into a combat patrol, for example. But it's not very clear, so people don't know what to buy. So they either buy nothing and maybe decide not to get into wargaming at all, or they buy the starter box and then they feel like they kind of wish that they hadn't once they learn, right? Clarity is key to getting and keeping new wargamers. Here's another gift for fans of wargaming, mostly for the more kind of indie space, right? Sell STLs if you're selling 3D printed product. 3D printing is amazing and allows smaller game companies to produce high detail miniatures that previously could only be made with like standard manufacturing, like plastic, right? Which has an incredible upfront cost for the manufacturer. The molds are super crazy expensive and all that kind of stuff. This allows indie companies to produce STL files that they can sell to end users, and then the end users can print the files themselves or have a friend do it or whatever. There's no shipping or fulfillment or warehousing on the company's part at all. It's really easy. However, not everyone has a 3D printer or a friend with one. So what some small companies are doing is to invest into building what's known as a 3D printer farm, a group of 3D printers, right? And then producing and shipping these 3D printed models themselves. It can still be kind of a steep learning curve and a high expense, but it's still generally cheaper than plastic manufacturing. The problem comes, in my mind, when those companies then only sell the models printed and then don't sell the STLs. The minis are obviously 3D printed, but you still have to buy them and then get them shipped to you, even if you have the means to print them yourself. Recently, I wanted to buy a mini that I had seen from a company, online and whatnot, and I went to their website to find out that they were currently out of stock of this mini. Now, this was a 3D printed model that they were producing themselves in-house, but it was currently out of stock and temporarily unavailable. Now, I assume that it had sold well and that they just weren't able to keep up with demand right now, printing it in-house. The problem was that they didn't offer to sell the STL file so that I could print the model myself. And I feel that kind of defeats the whole purpose of 3D printing in this day and age. Though 3D printing is becoming easier and more prevalent, there will always be a business case to send printed versions of these models through the mail to people without access to 3D printing and who are, willing to pay for the service. Now, that said, making those same files available as STLs so that people who can print them will be able to do so makes a lot of sense. My suspicion is that the threat of piracy is a concern to some of these companies, but I feel like you'd sell more STLs to people who want to print the file themselves than you'd lose in piracy. Most folks would rather pay to support the great models that they love from a company who makes them. Another gift for people interested in indie games. I would like to see more indie publishers using print-on-demand services. Now, if you don't know, there are like two main ways to publish a printed book. Like you get the book printed at a traditional printing and binding company in bulk with a pretty big upfront cost, or you use a print-on-demand service where the books are printed digitally and shipped out as each is individually ordered, with no upfront cost to the publisher, since they'll only get produced when and if they're ordered. The benefits are highly unequal, in my opinion. And full disclosure, Vince Venturella and I, produce our games via print on demand and will continue to do so. Print on demand is never out of stock because they print it when you order it. And it has no upfront printing cost because they print it when you order it. And they never have to store the back stock or even do any of the shipping yourself because, as I said, they print it when you order it. And you never have to guess how many that you're going to need to produce. You never have to have that kind of uncomfortable conversation, let's say, with your business partner and go, well, if we order this many, is that going to be too many or not enough? And we don't know. And it's easier when they just print them, as they get ordered. If you use a really good print-on-demand company, the benefit there then is that they'll usually have multiple facilities kind of like located globally, and then they will print the book closer to where the order came from. So if you order it in, let's say, the UK or the EU, it'll get printed over there versus getting printed over here in the States, saving on, shipping, like the environmental impact of shipping, and also for the end user, the players, cost. The two benefits to traditional printing and binding companies are that the books cost less per book, per unit, right? Which can mean more profit per book. And it's easier to do fancy schmancy printing techniques like foil stamping or spot aqueous coating on the cover and, stuff like that. But all the other issues, upfront costs, ordering quantities, restocking, warehousing, shipping, and all that are still big problems with traditional printing. Now, big companies are equipped to deal with all of this, right? Like they have staff to make this logistics stuff happen. But indie companies don't have that kind of workforce. When indie companies print traditionally, then they, with their limited staff, if they have any, have to do all this work themselves. They have to package up the orders and go to the post office and handle lost packages and monitor product levels and decide on whether they need to order more. And then they can't spend time designing their next game or expansions for their previous title, right? With print on demand, all of that is handled for you, and as customers, we'll never see the dreaded out of stock message on an indie game that we want to try out if it's print on demand. No more dead games. My last wish for a gift for Wargamers this holiday season is for more Wargamers to try some indie games. If you're perfectly happy with the game that you currently play, like no notes, right? Like everything about the rules and the models and the company and the lore or whatever is absolutely perfect in your mind, then I'm very happy for you. And I hope that that blissful state continues for you for the rest of your days. However, many other people seem to play big war games out there in the industry and frequently have some opinions about how those games and companies could be run better. I'm not saying indie games are perfect. Far from it in many cases. However, they can be filled with interesting and amazing ideas instead of the same old rules and lore with slight tweaks each new edition that are designed to maximize shareholder value. They're more varied and wild and allow you to play with whatever minis you like, even if they're models that you already have purchased and you don't have to buy new ones and they're already painted. It's amazing. And they're usually cheaper too. There's probably an indie game out there that will spark or rekindle your love for wargaming and the hobby. You just have to find it. I've been talking more and more about indie games here on the channel, and I'll continue to do so going forward into the new year. I hope to be able to help you find an indie game that's really up your alley, right? Like something fun and niche and different. I hope that we all receive these gifts either during the holidays or in the new year going forward. Wargaming is a great hobby that I love, and I want more people to love it too. So I hope you have happy holidays and enjoy time with family and friends, or however you want to enjoy yourself. And we'll see you here next week for the annual Tabletop Minions Awards, where I will wear my fanciest tuxedo and talk about wargaming stuff that I like. But before that, what kind of gifts do you want to see out there for wargamers and wargame makers? What do you think of my list? Let us all know down in the comments below. One last gift. I'd love some holiday depressmentation of the like button if you enjoyed the video. That would make my holidays. And if you're interested, while you're down there, there's also a subscribe button so you can see these videos pretty much every single Friday. It's free. Thanks for watching.